I'm fine, thanks to you, Bruno.
Good.
Bit hot, you know.
Yeah.
I think that summer's coming in really quickly at the moment.
Yeah, it feels like it just hit overnight.
Yeah,
it
does.
This is when you start finding out whether your aircon still work.
Yes.
And like you've been ignoring.
Have you regassed your car in a little bit? No.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And no, it's good to see you again. Silna's not around, but I think you're the regular now, so
yeah. Did you notice I've managed to change my name at the bottom corner there? So
fantastic.
Yeah. It used to be Silna. I think I've changed it now. We're accepting the truth.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Cool. So we have two things today to discuss. It's one question from Shakira, and then the next one is actually a scenario case that I'm dealing with, and I think they link. They link somewhat, so we can kind of take it as it goes. So the question from Shakira is, I would like some info on boundary walls, particularly in the Johannesburg municipality. I would like to know a little detail on how do I find out if a boundary wall is only on my property line or is in fact shared.
Okay, perfect. So this is one of those questions that doesn't really fall within the legal realm, but we can obviously help you out. So when it comes to properties that have been developed within any municipality, obviously there are particular lines that are drawn up in respect of those properties. We all know this. You've got neighbors that are sharing lines, and when it comes to those particular lines, the people that you want to get in touch with to determine where those lines are actually land surveyors. All right, now they're specialized in determining where the particular points of a property are and where they lie. Okay, but there's a little bit of a deeper point to this question. So for the how do you find out where they are? Land surveyor. They're the right people to do it, to approach at the end of the day. Attorney's not going to know anything about this. Okay. The question then comes in the second part, where you say that you're trying to determine whether a wall sits is shared or sits somewhere else, either on your property or it's sitting on your neighbor's property in the circumstances. And that is where we obviously kick in. So we do on occasion get these disputes where there is an encroachment by one neighbor on the other neighbor. Now, it's a very old area of law, and it's been dealt with since Roman times, where our jurists were writing about this. It's a pretty normal thing. But the way this works in law is quite fascinating, because you've got to look at what exactly you are dealing with in a particular situation where there is an encroachment that has been found. Okay, so in the question from Shakira today, she's basically saying, well, it's a wall. And a wall's not a difficult thing. If there is an encroachment, say the land surveyor goes out and sees that, well, yes, the wall's sitting on someone's property and it's not supposed to be there. It's got to be a meter or two to the left or right. That's something that can really be dealt with in the circumstances, because walls can be rebuilt fairly easily. And depending on what's happening between the particular neighbors, generally what you do is you come to an agreement with your neighbor about how that wall is supposed to shift and who's going to bear the costs of doing that ultimately. Those cases are neat and very easy to handle. The more difficult ones are encroachments where it's buildings that have been involved. So for instance, if you have an encroachment by a house or someone's garage or something like that, these cases do pop up every now and then, and they are far more difficult to deal with, because the general principle within our law is that we don't seek to tear buildings down. If something's been built, generally the law is going to favor a situation where that thing remains standing. Okay, so it's not an easy task to just approach a court and say, look, they're encroaching on my property, I need their property demolished. The court's going to look for what is a reasonable way of dealing with that, and it may well be, depending on the particular facts of the case, that demolishing is the right option. But more likely than not, when these sort of cases have come across my desk, I do try and impress upon my clients that you've got to look at it from a reasonability perspective, because tearing down a building might ultimately damage the building in its entirety. you can't have your lounge if one wall doesn't exist, or cut your kitchen in half. It really does take away from the property entirely. And in those particular circumstances, what might happen is there might have to be some sort of consideration that is paid between one of the owners to the other. And I literally mean by way of, I've seen a case where there's a garage which is encroaching, it's X amount, and you now in a position where you can agree, well, you're going to rent it from me for X amount of money per month. It's one way of dealing with it in the circumstances, which is a reasonable way without having to tear down the property. Again, this comes down to neighbor law, and neighbor law is a complicated beast, and unfortunately not the nicest area of law. People like to fight when it comes to their property, but we try and make sure that if you are going through a dispute like this, you try keep some level of objectivity about it and really try and find a reasonable solution, which is actually the second question that we want to just address on today's podcast. And we're just going to have a more general discussion with relation to servitudes. So servitudes also a solution that could be registered against a particular title deed if there is an encroachment. Okay, but we haven't dealt with servitudes at all as far as we remember from our previous things. And I think, Bruno, you can just give us a breakdown on servitudes, what they are, how they work, within our law.
Sure. So, our property registration system is actually one of the best in the world, to be fair, because we actually keep proper track of all property ownerships and that sort of thing. So, despite everything else and all the complaints we have on how the system functions and all of that, it has actually been maintained quite well. And the upside to this is that it's something that's called real rights. So real rights, from a legal perspective, is basically rights that people have over certain things that is known to the entire world. And the only way that things are known to the entire world, if it's been published and the whole world could actually know about it, right? So when it comes to property registrations and property ownership and things like that, mortgage bonds that banks register over property when they lend money to you, all of that, the beauty behind it is it's located in the central registry that's accessible to everyone, is known to everyone. The fees to access are very cheap. You can go there, you can print records, or anyone can actually print records relatively easily through a lot of the search systems that we have. So you don't even need to go into the deeds office to do these certain things. You can even download these documents. And so now moving along, one of the real rights that is associated with properties, aside from ownership and security and mortgage bonds, is things like servitudes, as an example. So servitudes is basically a right that's registered over a particular property that's not necessarily tied to any specific individual. So to give an example, a lot of the servitudes or right of ways that exist on properties are things like roads and access points. So you'll find that a particular property is actually owned by an individual, but on that property, there's a road running through it with a fence, like on the side. It could be completely on the side. And when asked about it, they go, well, technically that road is on my property, but it had to be there, it had to be maintained in a certain way so that the guy at the back can actually have access to it. And you find a lot of this, especially when it comes to things like subdivisions, where one property in the front would have a right of access to the property at the back,